Jackson had an absolute, total, and thorough inability to sleep.
I'm here to get justice for Michael Jackson.
Your Honor, I'm an innocent man.
He was not an anesthesiologist. He was not board certified in cardiology. Conrad Murray was not board certified in any medical specialty. Michael Jackson's death was a homicide. Thank you.
Mr. Subal. On the bottom left corner, displayed on the screen, there's a 09/06/25. Can you tell us what that is?
That would be the date.
That'll be the date of this recording, correct?
That would be the date on the DVR. So the clock that's set on the DVR, that would be its date.
Okay. And to the far right, bottom right corner, there is a 005824. What is that?
That would be the time on the DVR.
Okay, so that would be 12:58.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Supal, toward the end of that recording, it seemed as though the footage was on fast forward. Did you notice that?
Yes.
Okay, and can you explain what if anything, that means?
This was a manually operated machine, so when we started the recording, we didn't stop it. So everything that we were viewing, we were recording. So I think at that point we wanted to see it again because we thought we might have missed something, so we just rewound it and played it again.
Okay. And again, as you previously testified, had you wanted additional footage, you just would have continued watching it, and that at the same time would have recorded it on a CD?
On a DVD, yes.
On a DVD. Thank you. Now, that particular footage that we just viewed, would it be fair to say that was from a camera from the inside of the property facing towards the front gate?
Possibly. I did not locate the cameras. We only looked at the footage on the DVR.
Okay, and as you sit here today, do you know how many cameras were at the 100 North Carrollwood residence?
I do not remember.
Okay. Your Honor, I have one more additional disc that I'd like marked as defense RRR.
Triple row.
And this one is also approximately 7 minutes long. However, I will not be playing the whole thing. I would only be playing about a minute just for Mr. Supal to view it. Yes.
Thank you.
I apologize. Approximately 4 minutes, Your Honor. Mr. Supal, do you recognize that video?
Yes.
And was that part of the footage that you downloaded on June 25th from 100 North Carrollwood?
Yes.
And that appears to be from a camera that was placed on the outside of the residence, I believe on the keypad?
Yes.
Okay. Now, after June 25th of 09, did you ever go back to the 100 North Carrollwood residence to download additional footage?
No.
Okay. After June 25th, were you ever asked by anybody to go back and download additional footage?
No.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Mr. Gorgian, thank you. Speak cross-examination. People?
No questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. May Mr. Supal step down and be excused, Mr. Gorgian?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Walgren?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Supal, I want to thank you for your testimony. So please don't discuss your testimony or the facts of the case with any other witnesses until we finish the trial. You may step down and leave. And thank you. Mr. Gorgian?
Your Honor, I was going to ask if we can break maybe 5 minutes early. Thank you.
May I see counsel for just a moment? luncheon recess at this time. Please remember all the admonishments. I hope things warm up a little bit for your luncheon. Once again, my apologies. The staff are working on it. So we're going to be recessed to 1:30 this afternoon, at which time we'll resume. So thank you. Everybody have a nice lunch. We're in recess.
No, sir, I was not.
Okay. On June 25th, did you learn about the death of Michael Jackson?
Yes.
Okay. And when you returned to Los Angeles, were you assigned to assist in the investigation of the death of Michael Jackson?
Yes, I was.
Document.
Yes.
And is that another drawing made by Mr. Alvarez back in August of 2009?
Yes, it is.
And what does that drawing depict?
This is what he was drawing. It was a device we later discovered was a pulse oximeter that he saw on the fingertips of Michael Jackson.
Just to be clear, these drawings were made by Mr. Alvarez on August 31st of 2009, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was about 2 months after the death of Mr. Jackson, correct?
Approximately, yes.
Okay. And that would have also been 4 days after the coroner's office issued their press release regarding the cause of death in this case, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. The press release was issued on August 27th of 2009, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And the press release identified the cause of death as propofol intoxication?
Correct.
Okay. And Detective Myers, would it be fair to say that the 2 months prior to your interview with Mr. Alvarez, the press, the coverage of this case was overwhelming?
Leading up to the, yes, there was a considerable amount of news coverage. Yes.
And were you personally being contacted by different media outlets?
My office certainly was fielding numerous phone calls.
Okay. Now, showing you what's been marked as People's Exhibit 27. Have you seen that drawing before?
No, sir, other than when you showed it to me, like, right before the afternoon session began.
Okay, so prior to today's date, you had never seen this drawing before depicted in People's Exhibit 27?
No, sir. So that's correct? That's correct. Thank you.
Thank you, Detective Myers. No further questions, Your Honor.
Gorgian, thank you. Cross-examination by the people?
No questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. May Detective Myers step down subject to recall, Mr. Gorgian?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Walgren?
Yes, please.
Detective, thanks you for your testimony. Please remember the admonishments. You may step down. You are to remain on call and are subject to recall.
Yes, Your
You may
Honor.
retake your seat. Mr. Gorgian? Mr. Chernoff, your next witness is?
Your Honor, the defense would call Detective Orlando Martinez.
Do you solemnly state that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please be seated. Please state your name for the record. Spell your first and last name.
Orlando Martinez, Orlando Martinez.
Detective Martinez, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
As one of the investigators in this case, have you been present during the testimony of other witnesses?
Some, sir.
And you've heard my admonitions and directions?
Yes, sir.
Are they acceptable?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. The direct examination by the defense.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Sir, what do you do for a living?
I'm a police detective for the City of Los Angeles, currently assigned to Robbery Homicide Division.
And how long have you been a detective with the LAPD?
For 10.5 years.
Now, directing your attention to June 25th of 2009, were you working on that day?
I was.
Okay, and did you become aware of the death of Michael Jackson?
I did.
And as a result, did you proceed to the UCLA Medical Center?
I did.
Do you recall what time you arrived to UCLA?
I don't recall, but I wrote it down in my chronologue.
Okay. If I were to tell you 3:30 p.m., does that sound accurate?
That sounds accurate.
Okay. And when you arrived at UCLA, you spoke with a number of witnesses that were there, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And one of those was a gentleman by the name of Alberto Alvarez?
Yes.
Okay. And did you actually conduct the interview of Mr. Alvarez on that day?
No, that was Detective Smith. I was there for half of it, and then I walked away to conduct other stuff.
Okay, so Detective Smith was the one questioning Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Okay, but you were there for half of it?
Yes.
Okay. And during the half that you were there, did you ever hear Mr. Alvarez mention anything about putting away vials for Dr. Murray?
No.
Okay. And during the half of the interview that you were present, did you ever hear Mr. Alvarez say anything about seeing a vial or a bottle inside an IV bag?
No.
Okay. Now, sometime that evening, you then proceeded to the residence located at 100 North Carrollwood. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall what time you arrived to Carrollwood?
I believe it was around 7:30 p.m.
Okay. And when you arrived to 100 North Carrollwood, did you observe Mr. Alvarez there again?
I did not.
Okay. Did you observe Fahim Muhammad?
Yes.
Do you recall receiving a phone call from Michael Jackson in February 2009?
Yes.
Okay. Now, prior to that time, when was the last time you had spoken to Michael Jackson?
Approximately a year earlier, I believe he called me and...
Now, Dr. Metzger, are you holding the entirety of the medical records that you have on Michael Jackson?
I am bringing my most recent records from 2002.
All right. And how many pages do your records?
5 pages.
Are you holding the entirety of the medical records that you have? Okay. So when did you speak to Michael Jackson in 2008?
June 12, 2008.
And how many pages did you have? And what was the conversation about? So when did you speak to this was this
This conversation was about his health, sleep issues,
and what was the conversation?
nutrition, and some skin care issues. I believe at that time he was primarily living in Las Vegas.
Prior to June 2008, when was the last time that you spoke to Michael Jackson?
Many years earlier.
Can you estimate for us the year? 2008, when was the last time?
Again, referring to my records, June 23rd of 2003, he came into the office.
All right, and this is the Los Angeles office?
Yes, he came into the Los Angeles office.
So 5 years later, Michael Jackson called you?
Yes.
And this was in June of 2008?
Correct.
And one of the complaints that he had, or one of the things he wanted to talk to you about, was sleep issues. So 5 years later, Michael Jackson called you?
Let me refer to my records.
Yes. And this was in
He
June of
told me that he was taking Xanax for sleep.
Complaints that he had, or one of the things he wanted to talk to you about, was sleep issues.
We had also seen him for a preoperative examination for some forms of therapy.
All right. The conversation with Michael Jackson was recorded in your medical records? Is that correct? And is this just a typed up note?
Yes, I dictate my notes generally after I see the patient in the office, after a phone call, or after a house call.
When was the next time you heard from Michael Jackson?
It was 203, and then the next time was 208.
All right. And in June 2008, what was the conversation about then?
Overall, you may answer. General health issues. He was under stress and taking Tylenol PM, which is Benadryl and Tylenol for sleep. I asked him when he was next coming to Los Angeles. He wasn't sure. And we talked about some basic skin care and his back strain.
Is that all you talked about?
I believe that was it.
You didn't tell him that you would look forward to seeing him when he arrived in Los Angeles?
I always socially and medically want him to know I'm available for him. I probably said I'm looking forward to seeing you.
Did you happen to mention any other doctor to him during that discussion?
I asked him to come and see me and Dr. Klein because we had talked about skin issues. Dr. Klein was his dermatologist.
When did you next hear from Michael Jackson?
And the witness is reviewing his written materials.
February 26th of 2009.
All right. And this was a phone call or was it an office visit?
Phone call.
Were you aware at that time that Michael Jackson was back in Los Angeles?
I believe he was here rehearsing at that time. I'm not sure when the phone call was made exactly what his location was.
How were you aware that he was rehearsing?
He'd mentioned it, and I'd seen it in the press.
Now, prior to the phone call that you received in February 2009, had you been contacted by either Michael Jackson or anybody in his household or anybody that worked for him?
Objection relevant.
Overruled. May I answer, please?
Thank you. I'm not sure. I may have had a rare phone call with somebody in his environs. I had been in touch often with his nanny who would help with the children.
Can you have a moment, please? Apparently the mic isn't working right. Deputy Jones wants to just fix the amplifier. One moment. Thank you, Deputy Jones.
This nanny that you're referring to, is this Grace Wawamba?
Yes.
And she was also his personal assistant at that time?
Off and on, she functioned as a personal assistant and took care of the children.
You recall her contacting you at some point in 2009?
Objection relevant.
Overruled. You may answer yes or no.
I had been in touch with her infrequently in 2008, 2009, and probably before then. Generally over the children's issues.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said last.
I may have been in touch with her frequently, most of the time over social issues. How are the children doing? I really like to keep tabs on how they were doing.
When was the next time you personally spoke with Michael Jackson?
After February 26th, 2009.
And what date was that?
That was
reviewing his materials.
I visited him at his home at his request, April 18th, 2009 in Beverly Hills.
How did you wind up visiting his home? How did you know to go visit his home?
Michael called and asked me to come over to discuss several things.
Could you tell us at what time of the day or night or evening that you went to see Michael Jackson?
It was definitely day. I think it was early afternoon. April 18th, we'd have to check if it was a weekend. I don't recall.
It might have been a Saturday?
I think it was a weekend. I think it was a Saturday or Sunday.
Might it have been Easter weekend?
I don't remember.
All right. Was it unusual for you to visit Michael Jackson's house?
Not unusual, but infrequent.
Infrequent. Did he explain to you at any point when he called you why he wanted you to come to his house?
Basically said, I want to talk to you about some health issues, and he's known that I've been checking up on the kids and knew that I really wanted to see the kids.
All right. What was, when you came to the house, who was there?
The three children, Michael, some security guards that I don't recall names of at the moment. Grace was not there. I don't know who else was in the home.
At the time that Michael Jackson spoke to you, did he tell you that he was seeing any other doctors?
No.
And did he explain to you after the conversation that you had with him, was it a private conversation or were these other individuals around when you had this talk?
It started with Michael, myself, and the children. Then the children went outside, and Michael and I had privacy in the living room.
All right. You sat in the living room with Michael Jackson?
Yes.
In private?
Yes.
And you talked to him about medical issues?
Mostly medical issues and the stress he was under with all the rehearsal schedule.
How long was this conversation?
I think I was there for an hour, hour and a half. Totally, I would say that conversation, 20 minutes, 25 minutes.
How would you characterize his state of mind at that time?
lucid.
Doctor, let me stop you for a second. You said lucid.
Yes.
That's not traditionally a state of mind question. Have you observed him not to be lucid in the past?
Well, I think counsel may be testifying too. So the objection is sustained. We-ask the question.
Other than physical medical conditions, how was his mental outlook? Did he seem worried? Did he seem stressed?
He was excited. He was talking to me about some creative things that he was thinking about. He spoke to me about his excitement and fear about the tour.
What was his fear?
I think his fear was that this was a big obligation, and he didn't want to not do a good job with 50 shows. And he realized it was a huge ordeal to do that.
Did he believe that he was up to the task?
I think he believed he was up to the task, but also fearful about his nutritional state and staying healthy.
What did he talk to you about with regard to those issues?
He talked about his nutritional state and some of the things that I had worked with him years ago. He also had various health people and health food chefs working with him over the years. We talked about hydration and some of the things he had to do before performing and after performing. We didn't talk about injuries. I think he was doing very well with his chronic back issues. It was mostly his nutrition and hydration.
These conversations that you had with him, are they reflected in your medical record?
Yes.
Under what type of language? General health issues?
Yes. Medical issues we discussed included his physical and emotional strain due to upcoming rehearsal concert schedule, his nutritional and hydration state of health, and the stress related to his profound sleep disorder.
At what point did Michael Jackson bring to your attention that he had a sleep disorder?
Many years ago.
When did that occur?
I would say over 15 or 20 years, I know that sleep was an issue, particularly after performing. He could not come down.
When you have known him, you said for 15 years, or you had at least 15 years, maybe longer.
At least 15 or 20 years.
This was a problem that he experienced on tours or on a regular basis?
I was familiar with it on tours when I was with him, and I treated some sleep issues over the years infrequently.
Now, which tours are you referring to?
Objection relevance, Your Honor.
Sustained 350, 352.
Did you ever travel with Michael Jackson?
Objection relevance.
Overruled. You may answer.
Yes, I did.
Okay. Were you ever around him during these tours?
Objection relevance.
Sustained 350, 352.
As you can, back to the meeting or the conversation you had with him on April 18th. Did he mention to you any specific medicine that he hoped to obtain for these sleep issues?
He asked me about intravenous sleep medicine.
Did he happen to mention the name of this medicine?
I think he used the word juice. I don't think I heard the word of a specific medication.
And when he said intravenous sleep medication, what did you think? What was your opinion of what he meant?
I'm not sure. It could have been IV Valium. It could have been an anesthetic drug. I'm not sure what he was asking.
He merely asked you for intravenous sleep medication?
He did not believe any oral medicine would be helpful.
Did he tell you that he had tried oral medicine?
Yes.
And what did he say the success of that was?
I don't recall him naming medicines, but I do clearly remember, and from personal experience, many medicines just did not work.
From personal experience, what medicines did not work?
Objection relevant, Your Honor. Although I had personally tried him on Tylenol PM in the past. We had tried Xanax to help his anxiety and help him go to sleep. And on that visit, I tried other medication to help him.
Which, you're talking about the April 4th, 18th visit?
Yes.
What medication did you try?
I gave him Klonopin to be used, or Trazodone to be used, not together.
Was there any further discussion of the type of IV medication that Michael Jackson was interested in or looking for?
I don't recall, but he did mention he wanted some form of an anesthetic.
Well, Dr. Metzger, you didn't ask him at that point what type of anesthetic or what type of IV medication?
I don't recall asking him specifically about a given medication.
Are you familiar with the drug propofol?
I am now.
On April 18, 2009, were you familiar with that drug?
I probably had heard about it from patients having outpatient procedure or surgery. So I was aware of the medication, but not about all the subtleties of the medication.
During your treatment of Michael Jackson through the years, you have referred him to outpatient clinics, haven't you?
I had referred him or worked with plastic surgeons and dermatologists.
You have also referred him to anesthesiology clinics?
I don't recall a specific anesthesiology clinic.
Do you know Dr. Randy Rosen?
Yes, I do know Randy Rosen.
Who is Dr. Randy Rosen?
Randy Rosen is a pain management physician, and Randy and I had worked over the years with Michael in terms of pain management.
What kind of pain was Michael Jackson in that needed to be managed?
Most of the time it was a chronic back sprain, mostly from overwork, practicing, performing. On a couple of occasions he had injuries.
And and Dr. Randy Rosen, what was his primary specialty?
Maybe he is an anesthesiologist by training. I work with him specifically for pain management.
Is he involved with the Spalding Clinic in Beverly Hills?
Now I think he is. I did work with him at the Spalding Clinic.
And what is the Spalding Clinic?
It's a group of several physicians who, to my knowledge, do outpatient pain procedures in their suite.
What kind of medications were provided to Michael Jackson for this pain?
I don't know.
The objection is sustained. The partial answer stricken. Disregard.
Prior to your meeting with Michael Jackson on April 18th, actually during your meeting with Michael Jackson on April 18th, did he tell you that he was visiting Dr. Arnold Klein?
Visiting Arnold Klein?
Yes.
During being in Los Angeles at that time?
During that period of time, he was in Los Angeles?
I presumed that he would see Arnold Klein frequently for dermatologic treatment.
You presume that? Why?
Objection relevance, Your Honor.
Overruled. You may answer.
Most of the time, Michael was having mild dermatologic procedures, mild cosmetic issues in treatment of his chronic vitiligo and other skin issues with Dr. Klein.
Were you familiar with the treatments that Dr. Klein was providing Michael Jackson in April of 2009?
Objection relevance.
Sustained. 350. 352.
In your conversation with Michael Jackson on the 18th, was there any mention by Michael Jackson of taking you to London?
No.
Did he ever mention the need for having a doctor in London for his...
Yes. Yes, he did.
Did he happen to tell you why he thought he needed a doctor?
He was concerned about hydration, he was concerned about sleep, and he was concerned about injuries.
And did he ask for a referral from you for that?
I don't believe he did. I do not know any practicing physicians in London.
Well, he told you he wanted a doctor. He told you he had sleep difficulties. He told you he wanted IV medication. You didn't have any advice for him at that point other than to prescribe him Klonopin and Trazodone?
I couldn't give him any other advice.
In the years prior, when Michael Jackson was unable to sleep, do you know how he treated during the concert? You said during concert, after concerts. Do you know how he treated that problem?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained, 350 and 352.
I take it you did not provide him IV medication?
Definitely not.
And
It's a double negative.
I did not provide any intravenous medication for Michael Jackson.
Thank you.
ever?
I would say ever.
Your testimony today is that in 15 years you have never provided Michael Jackson intravenous medication of any sort.
That is my testimony.
You left after the meeting. You left. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you ever have occasion to speak to Michael Jackson again?
I don't think so. I gave him instructions about the medicine I prescribed and asked him to get back to me in terms of which medication was helpful.
And you say you don't think so. Is it possible that you spoke to some of his employees or some of his security staff after that time?
Objection, relevance, Your Honor.
Sustained. 350 and 352.
So from April 18th till the time of his death, you did not speak to Michael Jackson. Is that what you're
I did
telling?
not speak with Michael Jackson.
All right. Since his death, have you had occasion to speak to Dr. Arnold Klein about this particular case or about Michael Jackson?
Objection, relevance, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Motion to strike.
The partial answer stricken to disregard.
You have anything else? Dr. Metzger, let me see if we can narrow you down to the time period that you spoke to Michael Jackson on April 18th. Could you give us sort of the hours that you would have spoken to him?
In person, when I was visiting him,
Yes, please.
my note reflects about an hour and a half.
No, I'm talking about the time. Was it 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock?
I think it was an afternoon, and I believe it was a weekend. I can't recall any more than that.
It was early afternoon, late afternoon?
I would say early or middle afternoon. I don't think it was morning. I don't think it was late afternoon.
During the 15 years that you treated Michael Jackson, you kept medical records, is that right?
Yes, I have. And
you do have those medical records?
I have 5 pages of medical records since 2002.
After Michael Jackson's death, you were asked to provide those medical records to the coroner?
I provided them to an attorney, and I was never asked to provide anything else.
And the records that you provided to your attorney were the 5 pages that you have in front of you?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chernoff. Cross-examination by the people. Mr. Waldron.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Dr. Metzger, on April 18, 2009, when Michael
Jackson inquired about intravenous sleep medication, you explained to him that that was dangerous, life-threatening, and should not be done outside of a hospital, correct?
That's correct.
Did you ever give Michael Jackson propofol?
Never.
Is there any amount of money that you would have that would have convinced you to give him intravenous propofol in his house?
Absolutely not.
Thank you, Doctor. Nothing further on.
Logan, thank you. Mr. Chernoff, redirect examination.
Dr. Metzger, you told Michael Jackson he was dangerous and should never be given outside of a hospital,
That's correct.
but you didn't have any idea what medicine he was referring to?
Any intravenous anesthetic should not be given in a home.
So what Michael Jackson said was, I want an intravenous anesthetic.
Or intravenous sleep medication.
Well, which one?
In my records, I say, quote, intravenous sleep medication.
But you have independent recollection of him saying anesthetic.
I'm not sure. My notes reflect sleep medication, and anything intravenous was unsafe.
Anything intravenous.
As a sleep med.
You didn't broach the subject further. You didn't ask him what kind of medicine or anything of that nature.
I don't recall getting into any more detail.
Thank you.
Chernoff, thank you. Recrossed by the people, Mr. Walker?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. May Dr. Metzger be excused, Mr. Chernoff?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Subject to recall.
Yes, Your Honor.
Subject to recall?
Yes.
Dr. Metzger, thank you for your testimony in the case. Sir, please don't discuss either your testimony or the facts of the case with any other witness until we finish the trial. You may step down and leave. However, you are to remain on call, and that means you are subject to recall if necessary. Thank you, sir.
I understand.
Thank you. May I see counsel?